We've been exploring that sublime paradox of having arrived and perpetually becoming. But moving on from this inquiry, it could be asked, what is it that is there? What is it that's present when these two have been reconciled? There's a rather complex Sufi allegory full of arcane motifs and symbols. Let's see what it brings up for us, perhaps in the way of questions, recognizing that every aspect of every story is a part of our own psyche. This is a story about three brothers. They were called Adil, Amin, and Arif, and their names translated meant justice, truth, and wisdom. Now these three brothers lived in a rather remote village that really didn't have a name. They just called themselves the people. But one day a stranger came into town, and he had a story to tell about a far-off place where there was a kingdom in which the daughter of the king, the princess, was addicted to figs. She ate figs day and night. She could not be filled enough with figs. And it was told by the traveler that whoever was able to cure the princess of this addiction could have her hand in marriage, and if they were worthy, that they would inherit the kingdom in due time. Well, the three brothers were inflamed with this thought of attaining the hand of a princess and the kingdom. And as it so happened, their village was replete with figs. There were fig trees everywhere. So the eldest of them, Adil, said, I'm the eldest. I will go and take figs, and I will satiate the princess with figs so that she will be cured. So Adil had a basket made that went from his head to his toes, and it was filled with figs. Now he was a big, strong fellow, so he was able to carry this load of figs without any effort at all. And he set out on the road that was pointed out by the traveler. Now he hadn't gone so very far when he came across an old dervish sitting in a ditch, and after the usual pleasantries, the old dervish asked Adil where he was going, and Adil responded that he was going to this kingdom. And he asked, did the dervish know which way it was? And the dervish said, yes, you must follow this path wherever it leads, not deviating from the path in any way. When it goes left, you go left. When it goes right, you go right. And then the dervish said, well, you know, I'm a hungry old man. The body has to be replete. Will you give me some of your figs? And Adil pondered on this for a moment. And he said, I have weighed this up, and to me, it would not be wise to give you any of my figs, lest there not be enough to satiate the princess. So Edil went on his way. He arrived at the kingdom and was taken immediately into the presence of the princess, who scoffed the figs at a rate of knots until the basket was soon empty, and she was asking for more. So of course Edil, not having any further figs, was peremptorily sent on his way. Well, after many adventures, as he had had on his way there, he returned to his village. And Amin, his brother, whose name was meaning truth, went and gathered figs and bought himself a donkey and loaded down the donkey with figs and set out on his way. On the road again he met the dervish, who, after the usual salutations, asked him where he was going, and the dervish said, I can give you some advice, but I'm very hungry. Would you give me some of your figs? And Amin said, well, the truth of it is that if I give you any of my figs, I may not have enough to satiate the princess, so I'm sorry, I cannot take your advice. And he went on his way. He had many adventures, as had his brother Edil, until he arrived at the palace and was taken into the presence of the princess, who again devoured the figs at a rate of knots until there was not one left, and still asking for more. So Amin was sent off also back to where he'd come from. So Amin went back to his home village, and there was Arif, the youngest of the brothers, called Wisdom, and he decided to take figs and dry them so that he could take many, many more. And he went to town and he bought the largest and the strongest donkey he could find, and he loaded the donkey with the dried figs. So, of course, on his way, he came to the dervish. And after the pleasantries, the dervish said to him, I can help you in your quest, but first, would you give me some of your figs? I have to feed the inner man. And Arif said to the old dervish, I will give you all of these figs if you will give me the advice that will allow me to be successful in my quest. Done, said the dervish. And with that, the dervish took a piece of material and he sewed it to Arif's robe, his cloak, and he gave him one dried fig, and he said, this is a pocket, and when this fig is taken from this pocket, there will always be more. So Arif set off, and after many adventures found himself at the palace of the king, But the courtiers were loath to take him in, believing that someone with just one fig would not be able to cure the princess of her affliction. But when Arif was taken into the princess's presence and gave her the fig, and when it was eaten, he took out of his pocket another and another and another, day and night. She ate dried figs until finally she said, "Enough, enough, I cannot face another fig. I never want to see another fig in all of my life." So the princess was cured. The king, of course, was rejoicing, and he said, "Yes, you can have her hand in marriage. But in order to win this kingdom in due time, as was said, you must first pass 3 tests to ensure your worthiness to take over this kingdom. But before the tests are given, you must first find 2 witnesses, 2 who will be witnesses to your marriage." So Arif went out into that town of this kingdom, but he could not find one person who wished to be a witness at his wedding. Many of them had already aspired to win the hand of the princess and not been able to do so, so they were not willing to be a witness. And the others were afraid to make any choices of any kind whatsoever. So Arif went back to where the old dervish was. The old dervish said, "I can help you. Make this gesture." And he showed him a gesture. And he said, "When you make this gesture, those who are aware enough will recognize your truth." Arif went back to town, and he was soon able to find 2 friends who were willing to be witnesses at his marriage. So he took his 2 friends back to the palace. And the king said, "Now you're ready to pass the 3 tests. First of all, you must find the ring which will be the sign of the marriage that is to take place with my daughter." So with his 2 witnesses, his friends, Arif went off into the forest. But he didn't know where to look. He didn't know where to find the ring. But then he had a thought, and he put his hand in his pocket. And out of his pocket there was a little flute. And he blew on this flute, and a bird flew down from a tree with a ring in its beak. He went with his 2 friends, taking the ring back to the king. The king said, "Now it's time for the 2nd test." And he clapped his hands, and servants brought in 4 sheep, lambs they were. And the king said, "Lambs are the symbol of prosperity in our kingdom. Take these lambs and care for them for 3 months and bring them back to me." So Arif went off to pasture land to take care of the lambs. But the first night he was taking care of him, his two friends came and stole one of the sheep. So he was in a dilemma. So he went back to the dervish. And the dervish says, "Don't ask me any questions. Don't ask me what you want. Here, take this talisman. And whatever happens, the sheep, the lambs, will always come back to you." So the next night, the king, in disguise, came and offered Arif pieces of gold for a sheep. But he refused. But the sheep was stolen. The next night, the princess came in disguise, and she too cajoled him, and he refused, but she stole the sheep anyway. The next night, some of the courtiers of the king came in disguise and stole the sheep. But in between, Arif waved his talisman, and the sheep were returned to him. After the 3 months, Arif went back to the king with the 4 sheep. And the king said, "Yes, you've passed the 2nd test. And the 3rd and final test is of your acuity and your perception." Translated, we could say that this is presence and perception. Who were those who stole your sheep? And Arif responded, "My friends, you in disguise, the princess in disguise, your courtiers in disguise." Arif had passed all 3 tests, and of course, in due time, ruled over the entire kingdom, as well as having the princess for his wife. A question that arises out of this story is, what is the point in this tale where we could say, having arrived, met the continuum, the unfolding, the testing? I've already told you the answer. What is the point in this story where having arrived and becoming meet? And have we a gleaning what it is that is present when these two are reconciled? But first, what's the point in this story where we could say that having arrived and becoming met?
when he was prepared to give away all the figs.
Okay. The question was asked by the king at the point when he had cured the princess of her affliction. Will you do what I say? And Ariv responded, when in the presence of a king, all that is needed is obedience. What does it mean for us? What is it that we've discovered? What is it that follows from the recognition? Yes, I've arrived. I know it's done. Is it when we've given up all the figs?
It's when you've given up.
When we've given up?
Seeking. Just know that you're there. There's no need to seek.
Okay.
You're here.
So what point was that in the story? What was the point when Ariv had arrived?
Before we started, we knew.
Could it be at that point when he'd won the princess's hand? He'd done what he set out to do. All right. So what is the meaning of the rest of this story? Those three tests. Strange though they were, but full of arcane symbols and motifs. What have we discovered in our life since this moment where we recognized it's done, I'm done? Maybe not in the words of I've arrived, but we know. I'm no longer a seeker. No, right. What is it that's coming with the territory? Yeah. So maybe if we let this second part of this story digest, full as it is of those wonderful motives that only the Sufis can give us, we might get some clues as to what it is that's occurring for us in our life. Relative to this becoming, as it's called.